I had a really creepy experience a few years back when I took a road trip. I was traveling to visit my girlfriend, who at the time was in school far away. She had just 3 months left until she would move back home. But I had some time off work, so I decided to make the drive. I did not fly so that I would save money, and even though it was a long drive, I didn't mind too much because I like road trips. So the plan was for me to drive all day, stay in a cheap hotel the first night, and then arrive at her school the next evening. On the first day of driving, I started after I got off work at about 2 p.m. I drove all the way until about midnight, and then I was too tired to go much farther, and I knew I needed to stop and get some rest. I was kind of in the middle of nowhere at that point though, so I just looked for any kind of a city or town. I took a random exit that had some signs for food. Well, the only food there was McDonald's and a Taco Bell down the road. There was also a gas station, but the only hotel was actually this cheap and run-down looking motel that was about a mile farther down the road from anything else. Surrounding it was nothing but the parking lot and then basically woods off in the distance. There was nowhere else to stay, and this seemed fine to me because of the fact that I wanted to stay at a cheap place anyways. So I drove into the motel parking lot, which was almost completely empty. It looked rough, like I said, but it wasn't completely awful. It seemed like it would be good enough for the night. After parking my car, I walked to the office, which was at the far end of the building. There was a man working, and I got a room for the night, which was very cheap. I felt good about how much money I was saving, and I convinced myself that the place would be fine. When I got into my room, it seemed like a standard motel. The room opened straight out to the sidewalk in front of the parking lot. Then inside the room was a bed, an old TV, and a bathroom. It wasn't that nice, but it didn't seem crazy dirty or anything. So I relaxed in there for a little while until I turned out the lights to go to bed. It was not more than a minute after I had laid down to go to sleep though that I heard a knock on the door of the motel room. This gave me a bad feeling right away based on the hour of night that it was and the fact that I was at a sketchy motel. I ignored it at first, but whoever was there knocked again. So finally, I got up out of bed and crept over to the window. There, I carefully moved the shades, which had been covering the windows entirely. I looked, and there was a sketchy looking man standing there outside the door. I couldn't see him that well, but he had longer hair and was wearing a sweatshirt and dark pants. He had a bit of a beard as well, but had an overall dirty appearance. I had never seen him before. He knocked once more, and I moved away. I hoped that he would go away, but he remained there. Finally, I heard him start to leave. I heard him walking off, and I looked out the window and saw him walking away down the sidewalk, and he quickly went out of my sight. He had been at the door for a total of probably 2 minutes. After he was gone, I was really not that tired anymore. My heart was racing. I turned on the TV to try to settle down and be able to go to sleep. For the next 30 minutes or so, I flipped around the channels and was just starting to relax again. Then, as I was still watching the TV, I heard another knock on the door. I was sure that the man was back. I went to the window and looked out of it again. This time, there was a different man there. This guy was wearing all black, had a hooded coat with the hood up, and I could barely see his face. Another sketchy looking dude. I was definitely not going to answer the door for him either. He knocked again, and I ignored it. Then, this guy actually tried opening the door, which was locked. That really creeped me out. But after not successfully getting into my room, he walked away. I was so confused. Two sketchy guys trying to get into my room. What did they want? I was certainly not going to be able to fall asleep now. I went back to watching TV, just trying to take my mind off of it. For the next 30 minutes or so, nothing happened. Then there was another knocking on the door. I looked, and it appeared as though the first guy was back. He knocked on the door louder than before. I watched him through the window, and he was standing there, similar to earlier. The strange thing is that all my lights were still off and had never been on when the guys were there. The TV was on, but it wasn't providing that much light or sound. Why did these guys think that somebody was here? The guy stayed at my door for longer this time. He knocked again, and I was really creeped out. Finally, then he left. I stayed up watching TV for over an hour. In that time, nobody came back, and then I was finally able to fall asleep. I'm not even sure how many hours of sleep I got that night, but thankfully nobody returned. I left the next morning and drove all the way to my girlfriend's college. Looking back, That's something that I still think about from time to time. I never figured out who those guys were or what they wanted.